Hi everyone, my name is Memo, this is my channel Houseplanty Goodness, and this is a channel essentially where I like to talk about the things that I'm passionate about the most, which essentially is what you can see behind me, my tropical houseplants, or tropical houseplants in general actually. So this is a channel where I talk about some of my experiences with my plants, with hopefully that's something that you can take away and maybe implement within your own houseplant care routines. I'll usually throw in a bit of scientific knowledge, as much as I can remember from when I was doing sciences, so take it with a pinch of salt. But yeah, let's geek out essentially, if we can, a bit for a moment about plants. If you like this video, do drop a like down below. It lets me know that you like this type of content, so I'll produce more of it. If you like these types of videos generally, then do consider subscribing if you want. Every week I'll try to upload about 2 or 3 times. So there's more content like this coming out on a regular basis. It's actually quite nice. We're building a bit of a community now. We've got people who are actually having discussions within the comments, and also people requesting videos. This is actually a request from somebody on YouTube. So they wanted to see a bit more about the large Verrucosum that you might be able to see behind me. Now, the reason why I haven't done a video on the large Verrucosum for a very long time now actually is because it has struggled the mostest. It had a bit of an issue when I first got it. It was fine. I have to say I bought it as quite a mature specimen, so probably not as high. It was probably only about this tall, and then the rest of it it's kind of grown in my care. It was a bit of a learning experience. I've never had a plant that was so well established and so large to begin with. So, and actually when I first bought this Verrucosum, it was trailing, which I didn't realize it could trail the way that it was. And the stems, or the trunk, essentially the stem, really is quite thick. It's about that big. So huge and very well established plant. And the thing that surprised me the most with this is that most plants, when they trail, and they used to be climbers, when they start trailing, their leaves get smaller, but actually this had really decent sized leaves when I first got it. But I wanted to grow it up because it was just bending in all these awkward positions. Now, in hindsight, that probably caused a few of the issues, because when I tried to trellis it up onto a metal support, because the wood just wasn't holding it enough, there wasn't a moss pole that was strong enough to kind of hold everything up. It's quite a heavy plant, so it's got a metal trellis essentially. But I kind of ended up bending one of the 3 stems, unfortunately at a bit of an awkward angle, and it snapped and I hadn't realised. It might have just been because it flopped whilst I was trying to get it tied up onto the trellis and I hadn't realised. But this will tell you quite how resilient these plants are. For about 2 or 3 months, the leaves were growing fine. It was showing no signs of issues. It's only when the leaves started declining, and that happened relatively quickly, that I then kind of investigated a bit more, because I had no reason to look into things, that I realised that the stem was completely snapped off, basically. So that was just surviving on the energy reserves that were still left within the stem. Now, what I then did, waste not, want not, essentially, is I cut it all back down to that stump. I released the apical dominance, so there's been more growth since then in the last few months. So it's actually about halfway up the trellis now, which is good. It's doing quite well. But essentially most of the leaves were gone. So at that point I chopped up the stem and it was pretty much wet sticks. But it did really well. It took a while, but it's growing quite nicely. I will show you one of the propagations that's kind of done well. Bear with me. Now, you might be able to see one of its propagations. Now, please excuse the crispiness. This was in a Ziploc baggies to kind of like facilitate as much humidity as possible. This was one of the first leaves, and it came out, it stressed it ever so slightly, so it went slightly crispy around the edges, but you can see the rest of it is doing quite nicely. And when it started going, it went, basically. The interesting thing that happened with this, when I was propagating it from the wet stick, it started pushing out leaves before it started pushing out roots, which I thought was hysterical. But it then took even longer because of that. But it's doing quite well. I probably will be doing the same thing at the very top there. And the reason, I'll come back to the reason why I haven't talked about the mother plant, essentially the huge Verrucosum behind me, for such a long time, is it struggled a bit pretty much from the moment it came into my care. I did everything that I was supposed to. I had a much smaller Verrucosum, which was thriving. But with this one, it was in really bad coco coir. I didn't do all of it at the same time, so I didn't stress it unnecessarily, because there is something that a lot of us will tend to do, where it's do everything at once, and then you overstress the plant, and then it causes more issues. So I did try to kind of space it all out. So I repotted it into better soil, which was also in terracotta. Then that caused a bit of an issue because it was used to the wetter conditions of the pure cocoa coir in a plastic pot. So then it took me a while to get the watering down. I then trellised it up, it then kind of snapped. So all of this combined, and I think the only location that I could put it wasn't anywhere near a decent amount of light. So it was relatively far back. It was probably medium towards lower light, which is not something that it was necessarily happy with, which then caused some stress, especially because of the underwatering. And then I started getting some spider mites. I then dealt with the spider mites and I've been dealing with them for a while. But then the mealybugs started arriving as well, so I dealt with the mealybugs. But then after the move happened to this house, I think it overstressed it essentially. So better conditions in here, more light abruptly. So this is a situation where everything happened at once. So I'm assuming that's probably why the pests kind of arrived in throngs, essentially, is there's some mealybugs there and then some spider mites. But at the moment, I kind of went for the nuclear option, which isn't chemicals. I actually found that predatory pests, pest predators or biological control, essentially, so predatory mites for the spider mites and then predatory insects for the mealybugs, which bizarrely enough look like mealybugs, but they move a lot faster. That's how you can usually tell. If you want a video on predatory insects, let me know in the comments down below and I'll put one of those together. But they are doing great things at the moment. I'm already seeing that the kind of damage is already halted. Unfortunately, with most people, they'll be like, you need to quarantine that, take it away from all the other plants that you have. That's a wonderful bit of advice, but when you don't have the space to do it and also give the plant the conditions that it needs, it will then stress it even more unnecessarily. So at the moment, I went with the nuclear option, got the predatory insects and kind of spread it around most of the other plants as well. So hopefully if anything does move to other plants, the predatory insects will then deal with it there as well. So I've also got some lacewings that are coming in, which tend to be a bit of a kill-all for all pests, most pests in the household. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, that's the Verrucosum. At the moment, because the watering is still kind of struggling a bit more, I went for essentially what I find to be the panacea for all things watering related for most plants, and I've hydrospiked it. And actually it's surprising me how quickly it's getting through the water through the hydrospike in relation to what I thought it would need. Because I was watering it about every 7 days, I was letting it kind of properly dry out, or not fully dry out, but dry out enough with a moisture meter. But that plant was used to being much wetter and it was a much denser bit of soil. So I think it kind of acclimated to those situations. And when I removed that and gave it what it should be wanting, it then didn't like it. So it's now taking as much water as it needs. The soil mix is very airy, so hopefully it won't cause any root rot or anything like that. But so far, so good. But that's the reason why I wasn't updating on the Verrucosum. It's kind of struggling a bit at the moment. That's the other reason why I'm going to cut off some of the top bits. So hopefully if everything does go horribly badly and I end up losing that plant, I've already got one here that's kind of a replacement. And if I've got a few more cuttings, then it should be fine. And I think, to be fair, most of the plants should be salvageable, but it's part of having houseplants. Pests will happen. Don't freak out. Just deal with it. And just make sure that you try and see the signs that the plant is giving you that it's probably not liking certain things. If it's underwatering, if it's overwatering, if it's pests, if it's a dry situation and it needs more humidity, or if it needs more light. So just bear that in mind. But yeah, if you've got any questions, do drop a comment down below. I'd love to talk to other people that are getting larger plants, and it's a bit more of a learning curve because you think you have more of a grace period, but I actually found the larger, more established plants are less forgiving than the smaller plants. So bear that in mind. But yeah, drop some comments down below. Let's have a conversation. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.